This little slut has to say.
According to the Bureau of Prison Statistics, 38.3% of our current inmate population is Black, but according to the 2020 census data, only 12.2% of our national population is Black.
Okay, wait.
So if you don't believe in white privilege, how do you explain this disparity?
Okay, so if you don't believe in white privilege, how do you declare or how do you explain the disparity? Now, she's going into data, which is data can be used, and you'll see how she does this here erroneously, to mean anything you want it to mean. So there's no use in having a conversation over data. I discovered this a very long time ago. You can learn from my errors, my efforts. Data is useless. It's more importantly, it's useless to convert somebody from an anti-white position. Data can be used once you already have a person who is, okay, anti-whiteism is evil. It's an evil. It shouldn't be done. Then you can use data in various ways. Never use it to demonize other groups of people, of course, because it is anathema and off-putting to Western kind to talk about other groups of people's warts and their problems, their problem members, etc. And it also opens the door to erroneous remedies to the issues with the data, as you probably experienced. So here she comes out, and what's the pertinent thing for you to hear right here is that this little snide snot is anti-white. She's using the meme pathogen, an anti-white concept, white privilege, which is connotes a very wide sort of like a funnel of explanations, outcomes, causes, etc., that are all anti-white, that you can just bundle up nicely and say, that's anti-white, that's anti-whiteism. So now the most important thing to address here is what? Is it her data? No. If you're a conservative, you think it's her data. You do like what Charlie Kirk just did. You say to yourself, well, are blacks committing more crime? And is that why there are more blacks in the jails? But that's not going to persuade this little anti-white snot. You're not going to dunk on her in a way that other people will be able, a large percentage of other people will be able to hear and repeat effectively. The data is not the problem. The person is the problem. So I want you to look at the person literally as well. How is she dressed? Does she look like a typical anti-white or likely anti-white? What is she implying? What are the unspoken premises? These are the things you have to go after. Very often, it's not what's on the surface, it's what's unspoken. What strategies is she using to make her anti-white point? I want you to go after those strategies. Actually articulate the strategy. You're using this strategy because you're anti-white. Why are you anti-white? If you understand her and where she's coming from, and you focus on the unseen, the unspoken, you have a better chance of defeating her. You have a better chance of persuading her. You have a better chance of persuading an audience to that conversation. You have a better chance, more importantly, maybe most importantly, of neutralizing her. What does that mean? Paralyzing her in her conviction. As she stands now, she wants to go out into the world and make amends by having sex with as many non-white guys as she can. Go out into the world and wage war on white men by all the means at her disposal, to show up at rallies, to give money, to give time, to give intelligence, to give education to anti-whiteism. If you can make her doubt the moral imperative of moral imperative of anti-whiteism, you potentially can neutralize all of that. you can potentially make her question how right she and anti-whiteism is, which would undermine all of that, which would keep her out of the rallies for bringing in more brown people into the West, which would keep her out of elected office holders' offices screaming about how they're racists. And that's the victory. How do you describe this, or how do you explain the disparity?
Why do people go to jail?
Why are Black people in jail at higher rates than white people?
Do you see, look at her body mannerisms as well. You can tell this is a snide little bitch. This is the effronterous, holier than thou, and therefore can you see that it's a morality that she feels she has over you? Not data that she feels she has over you, morality that she feels she has over you. Why are Black people? Do you see how she's saying? Forget what she's saying right there. Do you see how she says this? If you can interpret what's really driving her, then you know where to strike.
That's the question, right? Maybe because they
Yes.
commit more crimes than white people.
But that's not true.
Okay, so did you immediately see this consternation? And she's going to go to another piece of data. Remember, data for human beings is attire. It's not the substance. There are no human beings that are so emotionless that it's just the data that drives. The data is the main driver. That's what everybody is afraid of when it comes to AI and machines, that it will operate with just logic, no emotion, and will act based on just the data. That's what people fear, is that it will be cold, and we attribute the same sort of thinking to reptiles. And so that's what people fear. No one actually does that. There aren't human beings like that. So going after the clothing is something she can just move around. You misunderstood. I don't have all the information yet.
According to the Uniform Crime Report for 2019, Black or African American individuals committed only about 1 million crimes, while white people committed about 4 million
Yeah.
crimes.
So
Okay, so you all know the easy dunk here. You all know the easy dunk. It's where Charlie Kirk goes. There, 12% of the population is Black. 60% of the population is white. Of course, there's going to be more crimes committed by white people than Black people. And it is indeed a trick, and that anti-whites use all the time. In her case, you can see that it's an unintentional trick. She goes from, and they'll mention it here in a minute, proportion to the raw numbers, the percentage of Blacks in the country to their percentage proportion in incarceration. And then she switches the math and goes to raw numbers to continue making the anti-white point. Dunking on this little flip-flop is not the win.
But that's proportion.
Yeah. How about the proportion?
There's a lot more white people than Black people in the United States.
It's a 60% white country and a 14% Black country.
So where do conservatives go? And this is where Charlie's going to make his error. And look, he's a bright guy. It's my opinion. Maybe he thinks he did it right. Whatever. All right. I don't dislike him for it, or he's a bright guy, but I believe he makes an error here. And the error is born out of the misunderstanding, the erroneous appraisal, the superficial interpretation. Where is he going to go with this? Where does he have to go? You have a situation where you have a conversation about 12% of the population making up 40% of the prisoners, and you have to answer that question. How do you get there? And how do conservatives answer that question? You hear again, you have the spectrum of white people. The vast majority are on this end, that don't like to talk about our victimization, don't like to acknowledge that white people are targeted, and don't like to say anything bad about non-white people or criticize non-white people. This other end, a much smaller percentage, want to say nothing but bad about non-white people. You know where they would go. They would say racial slurs, etc., focusing on the worst members of any particular group. Where does Charlie Kirk and this woman have to go?
So you just proved my point.
You switch from proportion to raw numbers. Right. Black people only make up 13% of the population, but they commit 40% of all homicides and 60% of all violent crime.
May I see
Now listen to the little snots response.
your criminology degree?
May I see your criminology degree? I mean, this is the kind of like, this is why you're not allowed out of the kitchen. May I see your criminology? You cannot speak on this if you don't have a criminology degree. Get up. Trust that it could get a lot worse than that. This is little impudent shit. What a little impudent shit this anti-white is. So did you think, conservative brothers and sisters, did you think she was going to respond with, wow, you know what? You're right about the numbers. I did switch from proportion to raw numbers, and it's cleared up for me now. It's cleared up. I'm a conservative now. Does that ever work for you conservatives? Never. It never does. Stop doing it. Stop doing it. Instead, she comes back with what is actually driving her. Anti-white, immoral, moral imperative, the social morality of our day. And so to cover her bases, if you will, she's resorting to this sort of impudent shit little, I'm more educated than you, and so therefore you are wrong. Anti-whiteism. But the question is still in the air, isn't it? Not only for this impudent little shit, but for all these other white people. And look at all these white people, all these white girls. Look at them all. The question is still out there. Why are so many black people in jail? Why is that question out there? Of course, this anti-white came up to this lectern or this mic, and she raised the question of white privilege. And instead of addressing the anti-whiteism in the room, the conservative content creators submitted to the topic of this anti-white's choosing. And now they found themselves cornered, haven't they? They found themselves in an awkward place that they don't want to be in, answering the question about why so many black people are in jail. What do you think their answer is going to be?
Do you have one?
Do you have one?
I don't, but I'm studying it.
Okay,
right
but
now.
you-
Oh, she
Exactly.
studied it. The laws of physics don't change whether or not you're a physicist. Why do blacks have a broken family versus a nuclear family, and does that translate to higher rates of crime?
You ready?
Why is it that blacks don't have parents, though? Why?
Good question. We subsidize single motherhood in this country.
White people's fault. Everyone understands the government to be white people. We subsidize single motherhood. We do it. He's owning the anti-white position, what he would call the leftist position, as his own. So for a room full of white people, especially white females, open forum at a university, he allowed himself to be cornered on why there are more black people in jail because he addressed the topic that she wanted to discuss rather than the topic of her anti-whiteism, which is what should have been discussed. She brought that up. He found himself cornered and then said, it's white people's fault. It's white people's fault that black people don't have parents in their home. With the little snot said parents. And then he came back with, well, they've got a mother there and it's white people's fault. And then he goes further with the error, saying, we did that to them. Wow. Only in conservative circles. As you know, when you come here on Sundays, we're here for 4.5 hours.